Hello, Carmel. This presentation is all about how European painting's relationship with edges changed in the second half of the 19th century. Now, of course, edges have always been important to painting. Painters have always wanted to achieve clear edges to ensure that the figures in their paintings can be clearly distinguished. And painters basically have two ways of achieving clear edges. First is to actually create an edge. Now, here's a painting from just before the period we're concerned with here. Now, if we look at Liberty's right arm, the one holding the flag, we can see that Delacroix has actually created the arm's edge by ensuring that there is an abrupt change in the intensity of tone between her dark shadowed arm and the bright background behind it. That contrast creates an edge. Now, the second way that painters can achieve a clear edge is to represent an edge by use of a line. The boy to the right of Liberty, the one holding a pistol, Delacroix has represented the edge of his raised arm with a line. Now, what matters here is that traditionally, where painters represented an edge using a line, it has to be disguised in some convincing way. The line can't appear to be simply drawn. Now here, Delacroix has used an edge shadow to disguise his line. Edge shadows look convincing because they are a real phenomenon. In this photograph, the girl's outstretched arm is edge shadowed. In certain lighting conditions and from certain angles, our eyes are used to edge shadows running along some edges. So it's a convincing way that painters can represent an edge. And painters also can use hems or creases or folds to convincingly and expertly disguise their use of lines to represent edges. Painting is dead. It was a bold claim by the deflated French painter Delaroche. In a way, it was obviously an overstatement. Arguably, though, 1839 was a significant moment in the death of painting's monopoly on the created edge through tonal contrast. The weapon of the assassination was this, the daguerreotype camera. In 1839, the daguerreotype was beginning to make a pretty good fist of capturing realistic two-dimensional images with pretty clearly created edges between areas of contrasting tone. And just 11 years later, photographic technology had become capable of creating edges at least as well as Delacroix had. Indeed, few painters could better the accuracy or the abruptness of those tonal changes. The edges around those scowls are pretty evocative. But photographs, except for capturing the happenstance of edge shadows, could not represent or generate edges using lines. Nor could photographs convey colour convincingly for at least another 60 years. So, painting would begin to move away from its traditional created edges and towards pastures new. Of course, there'd been many new pastures that painting would find in the decades after the Clark sisters glared into the daguerreotype lens. The one new pasture I'll focus on here is the undisguised use of line to represent edges. Now, as early as Millet, representing edges with line was becoming somewhat more common, but here the outlines are still well disguised as edge shadows, and moreover, abrupt changes of tonal and chromic intensity remain to create much of the edging. But skip forward a few decades to Van Gogh's transcription of Millet's paintings, and things have moved on apace. The lines that represent the edges of the blue dress in Van Gogh's painting are barely disguised as edge shadows at all. 1903, Picasso's blue period. Clearly there is little colour contrast to create edges here, so Picasso relies heavily on lines to represent the edges of his figures. Now, when Matisse's friend Pissarro saw this painting, Pissarro lamented how Matisse had used thumb-thick outlines around the central figures. Those represented edges have completely broke their cover as edge shadows. And by 1911, Kandinsky had taken Matisse's liberated outlines and freed them completely from any edge function at all. Here, Kandinsky's lines have escaped any contouring of figurative shape. And remember, just 70 years previously, Delacroix could only include lines sparingly and when completely disguised. In just a few generations, the line that represented the edge of that boy's right forearm had become, in Kandinsky's work, a compositional device in its own right.